We have a man who visits us on a regular basis. A little more than visit. He's a friend. His name is Sheldon Willow. And Sheldon comes and helps us with various tasks around the house. And he's been, likewise, a longtime friend. It has a significant interest in the Bible. He worked for us for years in our companies before we liquidated them. And he would sit in there, and he had the computer, and he had a Bible program on the computer, and he would read it. So just the point is, he's a really good friend, and he'll bring up various things. If he's coming to the house to do some work, then I usually drive down and pick him up in the morning, and I'm bringing him back. I think it was Thursday, and he said to me, What's Hazel talking about when she mentions the little red hen? And he said, I heard her telling Mason that he had to remember the story of the little red hen. He said, I don't know what she's talking about. Could you tell me something about it? I thought everybody knew the story of the little red hen, although maybe younger generations don't know that story. Well, the little red hen is a spiritually based kind of story, and it has a moral to it. And what I wanted to do today in this sermonette is to consider maybe a Bible lesson. There might be several of them that could be found in the little red hen. Now, I'll start out by telling you just who the little red hen is. You know, back in the days when we had CB radios, and when we would go on YOU trips and so forth, everybody had their own CB name, their own CB handle, we called it. And I was the peacemaker. You know, there was Sitting Bull, who was the pastor, Britt Taylor. And somewhere in the line, I was usually in the back, he was usually in the front, there was a red hen, a little red hen. The little red hen at the time had hair that was a little more red than it is now. But she would talk on the CB as the little red hen. And she really obviously enjoyed and appreciated that story. So Hazel was the little red hen. And I could perceive, after talking to Sheldon, that there was a grandma story involved with what she had been telling Mason. I came into the house that afternoon. Mason had come home from school. He's sitting in the chair in our living room. He's bent down diligently looking at a child's book. Now, he's beyond child's books, but nevertheless, he had apparently been given this child's book. And I said, "What are you reading, Mason?" He said, "Little Red Hen." And so, ongoing grandma lesson. Well, I asked Grandma why. Now, everybody, I think, understands the story of the little red hen. It is, by the way, a Russian allegory fairy tale. And so, you know, it's to make a point. I didn't know that it was Russian till I looked it up online to explain it to Sheldon. I found out it's Russian. And it comes from there. According to the online story that I got, the little red hen finds a grain of wheat in the barnyard, and she goes and asks all of the other animals if they will help her plant the wheat. None of them is willing to help her plant the wheat. And so she says, fine, I'll do it myself. And then, of course, it goes through several more stages. After the wheat is planted, the cultivating and the harvesting. And every time she goes and asks the other animals if they will help her, and they always say no, they can't help her. And so finally, she harvests it, takes it and has it milled, has flour, and even asks if anybody will help her bake the bread. And nobody is going to help her even baking the bread. And so she bakes the bread, and then everybody shows up because they want to help her eat the bread. And at that point, she says, no, I planted it, I harvested it, I milled it, I baked it, and I'm going to be the one who eats it, me and my chicks. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's an approach that we should take. You know, I mean, we don't want to be selfish in regard to that. But the point of the story is still not blunted by the fact that we would be willing to share with others. So I hope you understand that. It is, then I asked Hazel, what was it that she was telling Mason about that got him involved in this? Well, he wanted something, and she had told him that, well, you have to remember the story of the little red hen, which he already knew, but she apparently got him the book, and he read it for himself. But she had asked him to help in the garden pulling weeds, and he helped a little bit, you know, and then he wandered away, and that was all for him. She had some flowers, salvia, she said, I'm not sure what they are, that she wanted pruned because the blossoms needed to be cut away so more blossoms would come. And Mason was there for a little while, but not too long. Hazel had to do the work herself. Now, what we can say is in our society today, the story of the little red hen is pretty much going on with our young people, because there was a time in this nation when the young people really had to work. Now, Sheldon is one of those that had a lot of work to do in his life. He worked on a farm, and he learned to work, and he learned to do all kinds of things. He's a very valuable employee to this day because of all of the experiences and all of the hard work that he did. I find, and Mason's one example, but he's not the premier example, but many of our young people have not learned to work. They're not very, we would say, diligent. From the pages of Mr. Jim Williams' Bible, Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10. Story of the little red hen here. To a degree, and Hazel pointed out there's on the way here, there's a spiritual message from God about the little red hen, because if we work, God has a big loaf of bread for us. Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 10. Whatsoever. I think it's a long word, a lot of letters, but it's really a big word when you think about what is said. It's everything, whatsoever your hand finds to do. Now, it's not everything as in all things that are possible. You have options in your life. So you make choices, you have options in your life. If you're the little red hen, you plant that, you may choose to find, after you find that grain of wheat, to plant it, cultivate it, go through the steps, and finally have the bread. Whatsoever it is that you choose to do it with your might. By the way, Mr. Williams has this one highlighted in his Bible. Do it with your might. And that's what we find lacking so many times now. I think we're generationally changed tremendously over the last 50, 60 years as far as the amount of work that's being done by our young people and the learning that has gone into being able to do that work from our young people. Do it with your might. That means really make a strong effort to do it. Do it with your might. For, I happen to know what the sermon's going to be, so this connects in with the sermon. This next line in this particular verse, for there is no work. There isn't. When you get to where this is going, you're not going to be working. There is no work. Do it now. Do it with your might now, because you've got a certain amount of time in which to fulfill whatever it is you choose to do. There is no work, no device, no knowledge, no wisdom in the grave where you're going. We have a certain amount of time that's allotted to us, and whatever we choose to do, and we have choices. We don't have an unlimited number of choices. God restricts us in certain ways, but we do have choices that are left to us. Whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it with all of your might, because one of these days, you know, I'm closer than most of you. I'm going to be put in the pine box and buried in the ground. So that's the situation. So that's a spiritual principle that's here. Do whatever you do with your might. The red hen did with her might. The others did not. Contrast between the two. The end result was the red hen was harvesting that and eating that and enjoying the fruits of her labor. The others did not. So that's the contrast there. Conclusion. And Mason's sitting there reading that book, and he looks pretty diligent. So I thought, I'm going to try and encourage him to be even more diligent. And so I said, what about doing a book report on this little book, Little Red Hen? And so he wanted to know what a book report is, and we discussed that a little bit. And I'm going to try and encourage him to really be diligent to solidify the learning and the message and the understanding that comes from this little Golden Books, I think it was, book that Hazel had picked up at Walmart or some store, probably very inexpensively. But I want to crystallize that message by emphasizing doing it with his might. Now, let's write it down. Let's have a report on it. Let's grind it into our synapses so that we have understanding. And we all need to do those kinds of things. You know, whatsoever, when we do our Bible study, we need to do it with our might. Whenever we are involved in our prayer life or worship of God, we need to do that with our might as well. A certain amount of time we're going to be able to do that. And after that, no matter how much we've done, we will ultimately regret that we didn't do more. So book report, I'm going to try and encourage Mason to do that. But Hazel did harvest herself a little more diligence from Mason at the end of this process. He did go out and help a lot in the garden with her. The first time she said, you got to learn the lesson of the Little Red Hen. Well, he obviously knew the lesson of the Little Red Hen in the beginning, because he said, I helped a little. She said, little isn't enough. But he went out and he helped diligently in the garden, and he and Jackson both worked to clean the deck, which I had failed to leave very clean, doing diligent things, working with garden plants and garden soil and garden dirt and so forth all over the deck. But they cleaned it up yesterday for Hazel. So Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10, whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. There is no work, no device, no knowledge, no wisdom in the grave where you are going. Remember the lesson of the little red hen.